The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. I'm Charles Christian, I'm your host, and thank you very much for tuning in again. This week the show's given over to another full-length interview. We're talking to my old friend Micki Pistorius from the pop archaeology site Ancient Origins about myths and biblical archaeology. Then, in the second part of the interview, we switch to her old day job, where she served as an investigative psychologist with the South African police and was involved in profiling serial killers. It's my great pleasure to be talking to Micki Pistorius again. Now, we first spoke about 2 years ago when you just moved to Ancient Origins, I think, and we were talking about your book about heroes and the psychology of heroes, that they're always off looking for new quests and typically dumping their women on the way to go for greater glory.
That's true.
That about sum it up. That
does. What a way to start Valentine's Day, Charles. Heroes dumping women.
Yes.
By the way, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Let's just start with Ancient Origins, because I say you've now been there over 2 years. How have you found it? Because I was looking up on your biography and it says that you always had an interest in archaeology, and post your police career you did a degree in biblical archaeology. How have you found that?
Yes, I did. I've always wanted to be an archaeologist, and just before my 50th birthday, I sort of said, well, why don't you just go and study it? I do this thing, I study.
Yeah.
And I did it, and they allowed me, and I got an honors degree in that, and that's where it started. And then as a psychologist, you get to a point where you feel you need a break.
Yeah.
And I've always been a fan of Ancient Origins. I've always been a fan, and I followed them and I read their stories. And one day I just had the courage, and I wrote to Joanna, whom you know.
Yes.
And asked her if I could, and she looked me up and she knew who I was, and she agreed, and she said, you really want to leave what you're doing and write fast? And I said, yes, no, I'm serious, I do. And my life changed. I started writing. I left psychology. I left my country. I'm now living on a tropical island, writing. And it's fantastic. I learn so much every day, and I meet wonderful authors, you being one of them.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I honestly, I'm corresponding with wonderful people all over the world who have different opinions or the same opinions. And I think I'm in a very unique position where I can coordinate many different opinions and different authors into one group, and start forming an opinion for what it's worth. But that gives you a very wide spectrum. And what often intrigues me is the same idea of a lost civilization round about the Ice Age, the Iron Age, that was here, and that they were so sophisticated. And I'm so intrigued by them. And even here in Mauritius, I might have found some traces. We're still investigating, but did you know there are pyramids in Mauritius?
No, I didn't know that at all.
Yes.
Like a lot of people, somewhere like Mauritius is a little bit off the radar, and you don't tend to know very much about it. It's somewhere between Africa and India, the end.
It is a very, very tiny little speck, about 60 kilometers, in length and 40 in width. But it's a fun little island. And I was amazed. We've got pyramids, and they are really interesting age-old archaeology here that I don't think anybody's really, explored. Some people have, but it shows you. Sometimes I get a little bit of claustrophobic. When I ride, when I drive on the mountain and you can see just ocean all around, you think, oh my goodness, look where I am, this tiny little speck of the ocean. And I'm not sure if Poseidon is ever going to find me here.
Yes. It's interesting, as you say, the fact there is this element of, I suppose, synchronicity, that different cultures have similar cultural icons in the shape of pyramids. Of all the things you could build, who would have thought the pyramid be one of them? I mean, some areas it's a three-sided pyramid, and other it's a four-sided pyramid, but essentially it's the same thing. Who would have thought ancients 6,000, 4,000, whatever, 5,000 years ago would have thought, I know what we'll do. Let's get a lot of stones together and build a big pointy monument.
Yeah.
Whereas you'd have thought, well, probably the round barrow type of shape would be easier because you can just fill in the gaps with earth and you've got a nice, pleasing hill, But
like a hobbit.
Yes, well, like a hobbit, yes, yeah. Well, England's full of them with round barrows and things, and Silbury Hill and the likes of that, which were definitely round-shaped things, no pretense at being a pyramid on them.
Yeah. What I found interesting is similar pyramids on the Canary Islands, and then there might be some in Sardinia, etc. So all over, where you find islands, well, not just islands, you find these step pyramids. And if you see some of their photographs and you compare them, you can't really distinguish. Now, the local theory in Mauritius is that these are just heaps of stones that a farmer would have, piled up to prepare the land for plowing, for agricultural. Now, which farmer is going to build a step pyramid, align it with the planets? I mean, surely he's in a hurry because he wants to farm, and plow and sow and whatever and do things that farmers do.
Yes.
And then build 7 of them and align them. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that one doesn't make sense. No, the more logical thing would be like the piles of stones you get up on the Scottish hills and moors and places like that, where you just pile them all together. But they're not sculpted, and their location tends to be, well, that's a bit of scrubby stone that we couldn't grow anything on anyway. It's convenience rather than design. And then you've got a whole different set of mindset if you are actually aligning things and doing it that way. I mean, the other thing, going back to what you were saying about the ancient civilizations, advanced civilizations from if you like, before the last ice age, again, that crops up in so many different cultures as well, that you think, well, there must be something in it. There must be some element in there for that.
That's true, which would date it to about 12,000 BC.
Yes.
Wow. It's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. But the other thing that's very interesting about Mauritius that I think you might have personal interest in as well is, of course, we had pirates. Mauritius was discovered in the 1700s. It was here before, the Arabs knew about it, etc. But around about the 1700s, the Dutch arrived, and we have lots of cyclones and etc. And they didn't last, and they left. And then the French came for a while, and in between we had pirates, and then eventually the English came. But the pirate Robert Surcouf, he was definitely here on Mauritius, so we're still searching for some pirate treasure. There was a pirate treasure found, I think, in Reunion, just next door to us. But I believe you also have some pirate ancestry, don't you?
I do. Well, mutineer ancestry. They then went off slightly into a bit of piracy, I suppose. But yes, the family legend is that Fletcher Christian is an ancestor. That's Mutiny on the Bounty. And I grew up in an old seaport town where certainly my great-grandfathers would have all been dabbling in a bit of smuggling, among other things. Certainly seem to have been rogues. So yes, I do have an interest in that. Yeah.
I'd like to trump you on the rogue factor. My mother's surname is Tancred, and Tancred was the first crusader over the walls of Jerusalem.
Right.
And
yes.
Yeah, and they were the kings of Antioch and the kings of Jerusalem, etc. And I think they were also founders of the mafia, I think, in Italy. So I have, and apparently most of the royal families of Europe, you can trace back to the Tancred line, the Tancreds of Hauteville.
Yes.
So I I have some Tancred blood, obviously, although, I'm just a little girl from Africa, South Africa.
Yes.
But still, there we go. There's for rogues. I've got Crusader blood.
Wonderful. Yes. I say I had an analysis of my DNA, and it found on my father's side it was Viking all the way through.
That's interesting. Just before you called, we are soon launching, a DNA.
Yes.
You know about this, where we have Dr. Aaron Elhike, and he has some ancient DNA of Aussie and Vikings and Zulus and very interesting people. And then you can actually have your DNA analyzed. And I'm at the moment writing, the history of the Vikings in Iceland, etc. So probably you'd pitch up there, So
Yes.
So we give you a little booklet as well that you get once you get your eye. See if you're related to one of these ancient, historical, famous people. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I could move to Iceland and become a fisherman.
Because
in Arctic waters.
because they have these big, they have the Icelandic history and the sagas, etc., and they have land claims. So you might trace ancestor and then go and claim your piece of Iceland.
Well, that'd be interesting. Yes. Yeah. Now, just going back again to archaeology, in particular, you studied biblical archaeology. What was the intrigue in that? I mean, it's in itself, it's a fascinating topic, and looking for looking for Jericho, and did the walls fall down and things of that nature. what was and then you're into the Ark of the Covenant and into some very mysterious elements of it. But what intrigued you?
Do you know, it started when I was 16, and we had to select subjects, for matric.
Yeah.
And one of the subjects, they called it Bible study, but it had nothing to do with religion. It was, I've always been interested in history, but it had to do about a study of the history of the Bible period.
Mm-hmm.
I think sort of. And it started there, my interest. Both my parents, my father was a professor in accountancy. He was at the university, he was a rector there. And my mom was a social worker. But both of them were very interested in history. And we grew up with them telling us stories. And whenever we went on road trips, they would stop at places and tell us the history. My mom would also, because of her ancestry, go to England, and she would travel to all the castles and bring us back all these wonderful stories. So you grew up with that. And I was just somehow interested in that area, and the Sumerian gods, and don't know why. It's interesting. Maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't say there's a reincarnation thing to it, but I've just always been drawn to it. And now that I am with Ancient Origins and I find answers that all my life I had a suspicion that this was there, and soon as well, we're launching these tours, and I'm the hostess to the Turkey tour. And then we'll be going up to Nimrod and all the old places and Göbekli Tepe and looking, and feels like I've lost something there, which I might just find. One day we'd like to organize a tour to Iran, and we'd like to organize a tour to Iraq and old Samaria. We are working on that.
Yes.
It's just difficult at the moment, and we're getting a good guide to take us. But you feel I've been here before, and I know this, and you feel you're going to find something that you've lost in another epoch. I'm not sure. That was sort of, it's a very mystical answer, but it's something age old. If I say my ancestors were crusaders, it's like swinging.
Yes, you're going back to the Holy Land, as it used to be called. Yes.
Yeah, but I can remember it. There's sort of a soul memory. I know what it feels like to swing a scythe, or a sable in my hand.
Yeah.
There's a soul memory. I can remember it. I know what it feels. It's weird, isn't it? Sort of. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird answer, but this is the Weird Radio Show, so that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, one of our other guests, Dr. Heather, what's her name? Dr. Heather. She wrote about haunted archaeology, demonic archaeology, and her point was how many of the demons and mystical creatures of Western culture can be traced back to what used to be called Mesopotamia, the land between the two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, which of course is where the original Eastern European, original civilizations in Europe first sort of sprang from. And we still, the demons that terrified the Sumerians 6,000 years ago, they still live on today, and they still crop up in modern demonology and mythology. And it's, as you say, it's this sort of almost ancient race memory that there is something that we know from there that still resonates with us, and all of those places. And
yes. Word resonates is a good word to describe it. It's just, someone once asked me, what's the difference between, I don't know, belief, if you believe in something, and whether there is a fact, and I say, well, between belief and fact, there lies memory. It seems as if I remember it in a way, vaguely, but I remember it. When I read it, people talking about the Anunnaki and the Nephilim and etc.
Yes.
And this wonderful, sophisticated race, to me, yes, that's true. I remember. Yeah, that's right. That's a feeling I get. Yeah, that's right. I remember that. That's cool. That's how it was. I know it's difficult finding factual evidence of it, but there's memory, sort of. I don't know, a conscious. I don't know what Jung called it, collective consciousness. But somehow I remember it. It's familiar. It's very familiar.
Yeah. I've just
and
remembered.
I think this is.
Sorry, I've just remembered who it was. I was trying to remember. The book was Evil Archaeology by Dr. Heather Lynn.
Yes.
Yes.
I might just contact her and ask if she'll give us an interview or webinar. That sounds very fascinating.
Yes. I think she's written for you. She's a very good talker. Anyway, we're slightly off piste there on that. And in terms of, you've said you've done a little bit of travelling around Mauritius looking for things. Have you ever been on archaeological digs? Anything formal of that nature, practical nature?
No, not formally. At this stage, if you tie yourself formally to it, then you're committed to that one site.
Yes.
And to me, that's a little bit. There's so much more that I want to see. And my contribution is writing about it because I'm a writer.
Yes.
So, I'm not that young. So I don't think I should be going around digging. I don't think my back will be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I can sit and write about it, and tell people about it. And I think this is what's so wonderful about Ancient Origins. It's, it's a platform where we can tell people. And we bring so many different authors and so many different points of view together where people can read and know more about it. So I think in that sense, I see my way more of writing rather than digging.
Yes. No, I think that is true. It I think field archaeology is very much a younger person's game. Certainly is in England, where it tends to involve being in your knees in a muddy trench.
I have much respect for the dedication, of professors of my age who work on a site for 30 years, etc. I mean, were it not for them, we would not have places like Akrotiri and Croy, etc. So I have much appreciation for them, but I would rather write about what they do because they don't have time for that.
Yes. No, that totally makes sense.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Right. Can we then, going in a totally different direction, talk about your earlier career? You also are, as you mentioned, a psychologist, and you were involved with forensic psychology in South Africa with the South African police forces, and you became a profiler. Now, how did you get, first of all, into psychology of all the various disciplines?
I was a journalist first.
Right.
I was a journalist, and there's a relation. I don't know, journalists, psychologists, actors, and lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at their psychometric profiles, they're very close. I do a lot of career counseling, or I used to as well. So the profile of a psychologist, a journalist, a lawyer, and an actor are very close. So I was first the journalist, and I got married to another journalist, and then we wanted to go back, and I felt like studying, and I thought, well, I do think I can do psychology, and that to me, the human was interested, and I got in. Mm-hmm. And from psychology I studied, etc. And then in my final year after my master's degree, I was still in my master's. Yeah, one of my professors got a call from the police, and they said they're looking for a profiler. And at that stage, one of our other professors had a list of topics that we had to do an assignment on, and one of them was serial killers. And I can't remember if I deliberately picked it or it just fell in my lap, but I got serial killers. Mm-hmm. And I was interested in it, and started doing research. And then when the police phoned the other professor asking for a profiler, he said, well, we've got Micki, and she is actually, doing a doctorate thesis on serial killers. And the police said, yes, send her over. So I got, the moment I finished my master's degree, I got the job in the police and started working from them from the very first day. Now, on the very first day, I was in Pretoria, which is the capital, and they put me on a plane and they flew me down to Cape Town. So there I had to start working on the station strangler. And I was so naive, I didn't even know that detectives wore plain clothes. Mm. It was really, it was an eye-opener. And a day or two later, we were out in the dunes in Mitchell's Plain on the coast, looking, for the bodies of the little boys that were killed. And found a severed hand that had eaten by rats, etc. So I was really thrown into the deep end learning.
Yeah, that does sound a bit thrown in the deep end, yes.
Really?
Day 2, your first piece of body is found, yes.
Yes, it's true. So it was hectic, but I did it, and it was good, and I did it for 6 years. And from that, I started writing the books, and I lectured, and somehow the method that I designed or figured out according to Freud's theory about how do serial killers develop, that works. And that I taught all over the world and trained other profilers and police forces all over the world. And then also, we developed interrogation strategies, et cetera, et cetera. So that was all of that. And that gave me an opportunity to travel. Yes. But speaking about travel, one thing that I think that was quite interesting and inspirational in my life, as with many British girls, I'm sure, when I was a teenager, I was very much in love with horses. Yeah. So I started riding when I was 10 and read a lot about horses. And one day I read about these wild horses in the Camargue, France. And on a mental plane, I connected with these horses and I said, I don't know how, but one day I will meet you and I will see you. I will make a plan, I'm a middle class little girl in Africa, but anyway, I just made this connection with these horses. And I said, one day I will meet you. So my life carried on, etc. And I got involved in the serial killers. And there was an NGO in France called the Centre International des Sciences de Pénal et Criminel. And they invited me over and I started teaching profilers in France.
Yes.
And then one day, the magazine Paris Match, they asked if they could do an interview about me, a story. And I said, no, that's fine. And they heard somewhere that the wind is my most favorite element. So they arrived at my hotel and they said, we want a photograph of you where the wind is blowing in your hair. And I said, oh, okay, no, that's fine. They said, but the only place where the wind is blowing today in France is on the Camargue. So they put me on the plane and they flew me down with a photographer. And we got there and we got into a car and eventually we're standing on the beach in the Camargue. Mm-hmm. And the next moment, they came. They came over the dunes. The horses came. They just appeared. And they came straight up to me. And the photographer was just clicking away. And they snuggled, and they said, we remember. You said you'd come, and here you are. Okay. And that was so fantastic. And I've got the pictures, and then I always use that as an inspirational thing. When I was a little girl, my mom said you could become anything. And she believed in me. And this was one of my childhood dreams that came true because my mom said you can become anything. So I didn't at that stage think I was going to become a profiler of serial killers, but that's just
yes, it's
and through that, one of my childhood dreams came true, and I met these horses, and I would often use that. I've used it in Britain. I was invited by another company to train British teachers. And I used that in my introductory speech to them. I did also show them a few photographs, just a few, of serial killer victims. I warned them before that be careful, these are going to be explicit. And, they agreed. One or two didn't like it, they left. But the others said, and I said, well, this is what serial killers do. But then I told them the story of the Camargue. And I said, my mum believed in me, but if we can believe in children, the serial killers didn't have that. Their parents didn't believe in them. Charles, when I interviewed the serial killers, I asked them, what was the worst thing that ever happened to you in your life? And all of them, without knowing what the others said, answered the fact that my parents didn't believe in me.
Mm.
And that stuck with me. And then, and then I showed them these photographs and I showed them the story, told them the story of the horses. And I said, the serial killers, every serial killer, adult serial killer at one stage in his life was a child in somebody's class in school.
Yes.
So if teachers can be inspired to really make contact, and good teachers do, they make contact with these children, and that is your next line or the first line of defense because the parents are failing. With serial killers, but teachers can believe in these kids and perhaps stop them from developing into in a serial killer. And that was the purpose why during that speech I showed them the photographs and told them the story. I know I've been criticized about it, but there was a deeper message in it, and I used my own experience to get the teachers to realize, they do realize how important they are and the role that they play in children's lives. They can make all the difference. An inspired teacher can.
With the, if you like, the childhood of serial killers, how early on do the traits set in, or, is the damage done, if you like? Because obviously when you are at school, by then you are 5, and you will have already possibly suffered a lot of abuse.
Yes, it starts within the first 6 years of life.
Right.
Now, this is where I use the Freudian theory as well. For instance, if you have, Freud spoke about your different psychosexual developmental phases. So the first one was the oral phase. So I had a serial killer, and he mutilated breasts.
Right.
Okay. So now the inspiration behind that would be that you cut the breast to get to the milk,
Mm-hmm.
and the symbolism is he was not breastfed.
Right.
Right. So on a very pre-verbal psychological phase of between 0 to 2 years, there was already fixation, which is like a psychological short circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Something goes wrong. Your next phase could be an anal phase, which is 2 to 4 years. And on crime scenes like that, there would be very much perfection. The Station Strangler was like that. He killed little boys, but they were neatly redressed. This crime scene was extremely neat. This is where the things people are very anal comes from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
that was an anal crime scene. Then you get to the Oedipus phase, which is very sexual, and you get sexual crime scenes where certain objects are inserted
Yes.
into women's private parts,
Yeah.
resembling a male organ.
Yeah.
And that has to do with penis envy. So it's all there. So it starts before 6. So by the age of about 6 or so, or when they reach puberty, the fantasies are there already.
Yes.
So if you can catch them early, before puberty, and pay attention to them, there is a after that it's going to be too late.
Right.
Because then they're going to start experimenting and they're going to start reaping rewards of it.
Yes.
With the fantasy of the serial killers as well. In all our fantasies, in all human fantasies, we are always the hero. I mean, do you ever have a fantasy of where you're not the hero?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're all superheroes in our fantasies. Okay. Now, the same is with the serial killer. The people, they feel inferior, but in their fantasies, they're superhuman and everything is correct. And they have absolute total power. Now, the most omnipotent total power that you could have is over life and death of another person.
Yes.
So, and then once they start acting out the fantasies, and they're not completely perfect, reality is never as perfect, and then they start repeating them to get them perfect, and there's your pattern of repetition. So if you can stop them early in school, in primary school, and pay attention to them, etc., you can pick it up, actually.
We've all sort of seen movies and TV shows about serial killers and the like. How accurate, not going into the police procedural side, because obviously in any movie or TV series you simplify that because you don't want to have 4 hours of people going through paperwork or something. You obviously speed things up and you glamorize it a bit. But in terms of the psychological basis, how accurate or inaccurate are they?
Some of them are reasonably accurate. The one mistake that they often make is where the serial killer turns it very personal and starts hunting the profiler. Theoretically, well, it doesn't work like that because serial killers have their specific victim profiles that they like. So if you happen to fall within that profile, you're going to be in trouble. But usually, no, they avoid us because they don't want to be caught.
Yes.
But also quite interesting, I am at the moment, negotiating with a British company called Fired Up Films, who's just bought the rights, to make a television series on my book. So I hope that's going to be accurate. At least I'm there.
Is that your book, Catch Me a Killer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So we're working on that, which is going to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are accurate, but I think, there's also, they must make it interesting to the public. As you say, nobody wants to see 4 hours of paperwork or in a television series, you get the DNA results like immediately by the end. I mean,
yes,
that's very unrealistic, in the police. But some of them are good, some of them are not.
Yeah. Your book, it's been out a while, hasn't it? Your book.
Yes.
Give us a quick synopsis of what it's about. I mean, it's down here. I'm just looking it up here. It says it's your autobiography. Is it autobiography?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, it's an autobiography. I think it was published in 2000. But it's around about there. It has my life as a profiler from, I think, 1994 for about 5 years or so. The last year is not in that book; it's in the Afrikaans version, but it will be in the television series. The last crime scene that I did was particularly horrifying. But yeah, and it's just through my life. How the book happened is because I'm basically first an author or a writer.
Yeah.
The way that you have catharsis is by writing about stuff. So whenever it upset me or whatever, or I had to make sense of the chaos around me, I would write. And then through this lecturing overseas and in France, etc., there was a British publishing company or agent that called me and he said, "Don't you want to write a book?" And I said, "Well, I've already written this." He said, "Well, turn it into a book." So I did. And he had the book, but nothing happened. And I thought it wasn't a good book. And then eventually Penguin contacted me and they said, "We're interested in this book," because by then I'd already terminated the contract with the other agent. And I said, "Oh, I thought it wasn't a good book." And they said, "No, it's a fantastic book. It's just he wanted too much money for it."
Right.
And then they said, "Can we have it?" And I said, "Yeah." And the rest is history. It was there were 10,000 copies sold, and I think it was sold in Britain and sold in whatever. I have a problem with a French author that sort of plagiarized it, which we're busy with at the moment. Very sad story, but you'll speak about that later.
Yes.
But that's the book, and that's what they'll base the TV series on.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Just going back to one of the earlier points you made, I should have asked more about. You were saying that journalists, lawyers,
Psychologists and actors.
Psychologists and actors all have a similar profile.
Yes.
What's the similarity then?
They are all interested in people,
right?
And the background of people. So if you do some kind of personality test, they would score high on languages. They will score high on history. That kind of thing. You'll find that there. Even thinking about it, if you have a lawyer in court, there's an amount of acting, isn't there?
Oh yes, yeah,
definitely. And the same with psychology. I mean, there's a persona that sits and that's a psychologist, which is a little bit different. Not you are authentic, but there's an amount of acting in it. We are interested in how the mind works, what makes the person tick. Just from different aspects. Actors copy people or they mimic people. Yes. Psychologists are interested in the psyche, the lawyers, why did this person do this crime? The motive behind it, the motivation. That's why with psychology and crime, as the profiler, there's a definite link in it, the history of it. So definitely there are similarities in backgrounds and in the profile, personality profile.
Right. Yes, no, that makes sense. I certainly know there is a lot of overlap between actors and lawyers, and a lot of actors were once lawyers and moved over to the stage. I hadn't realised that. That's how it works, yes.
And then you get introversion and you get extrovert. Your actors mostly they are extroverted.
Yes.
With lawyers, you get introverted, and they would be the guys. They wouldn't, they would be your backroom doing contracts, etc.
Yeah.
And the extroverts would be more doing the litigation.
Yes.
So, and that's the thing. But journalists as well, they also fit in there.
In your forensic work with the police, were there any links in the careers the serial killers had? If you like, their day jobs.
Yeah, no, they weren't. They come from all spheres of life. We had one that was a Methodist minister.
Mm-hmm.
I had another one that went to church with the sole purpose of selecting his victims there. No, they were teachers, they were laborers, they were etc. They were rich, they were poor. There was no specific link regarding either their jobs or their ethnicity or age or nothing. They in that sense every one of them is very, very unique, which makes it so difficult,
Yes.
to investigate them. Also because their victims are strangers to them. Usually when you investigate a murder, there will be some kind of motive. It would be money or revenge or passion
Yes.
or something.
Yes.
But with a serial killer, the motive is very deep psychological. So it's not obvious on the crime scene as opposed to other murders.
Right. Yes. Yes. I mean, I don't know whether it still holds true, but there used to be a statistic bandied around that you were more likely to be stabbed by someone you knew in the kitchen before 9 o'clock in the morning than you were to win a lottery.
I believe that. Yes.
That most victims are
Yes.
known to their killers, if you like.
Yes.
The idea of the random killer doesn't really exist. But as you say, but with serial killers, it's an entirely different scenario. Right. Yeah.
Yes, yes. No, that's definitely true. Although now with terrorism, it might change, etc. But because terrorists also go about randomly just, attacking members of the public, but their motivation is different, very
Yes.
different motives.
Yes.
And that's where it lies.
Yes, yes. No, I've seen that from UK crime statistics where the slant about, if you like, being killed by a stranger is thrown out by terrorist acts. But if you remove the terrorist acts, then it's once more back to the fact most people are killed by people that they already know. Yeah.
Yes. No, that's very, very true. I also wrote a book about female murderers.
Mm-hmm.
Fatal Females, it's called.
Yes.
And one thing that was really interesting to me, if we get into the psyche of people, is when a woman kills her husband, she usually cannot resist some little form of celebration. And I always used to teach the detectives that, the husband is killed or this or that or whatever, and there's the weeping widow, etc. And then I say, well, just look, because you might find a champagne bottle in the dustbin, or she just had her nails done. I mean, if you really love your husband, as you should, and he's killed, you're not going to sit there for a nail session, are you?
Yes.
You will be weeping and I don't know, extremely sad and in mourning. The last thing that you're going to do is having your nails done.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yes.
And they can't resist it. They just cannot resist this little thing of celebration. Wow, the bastard is dead. Oh, yay. So that was just interesting to me always.
One of the things that I've certainly noticed from when you have the grieving victims, family, friends, partners, whatever, making a statement to the police saying, we need your help to find the killer and whatever. Yeah. There does seem to be a bit of correlation between those who put on the more dramatic show then subsequently being arrested as the actual killers themselves, and the more genuine ones who are just quite clearly grief-stricken and shocked and just are basically incoherent with sadness and upset. Have you found that?
Yes, you do, and we're also trained, and I also do train detectives in to use the term body language is a bit, I don't know, it's much deeper than that, but they are very good techniques. Paul Ekman wrote a book called Telling Lies. Very fine techniques that you look out for, just to see to differentiate between this malingering pain of them and the real pain. But we also have to be very careful because people are very different in the way that they process something like that. Some people, men might be very active and they want to keep the situation in hand. While some people just go quiet or etc. So we have to be different to judge because, oh, he was so quiet in court or this or that or whatever, doesn't he show any emotion? Some people don't show emotion like that. It's not to say that it's not there, but yeah, that is it's a difficult thing. But there are, if you watch them long enough, there are telltales and come out. It's often as well when children disappear. You can see that very often. I'm not saying, of course, that it's there always with all children. The parents are involved. Of course not. But sometimes you do see that.
What sort of body language tics tells do they give then?
I'll give you an example. We once investigated a murder of a man, and he was found in his bathtub. And I had a photograph of him, and only in the corner of the photograph, you could see him lying in the bathtub, and he was stabbed multiple times, with a sharp knife. But the photograph also showed the wash basin, and he was a gay man, and we interrogated his gay lover, who had been his lover for many, many years. And I showed the man the picture, and I said, "There's something puzzling me. You often, come into this person's house. Yes, he does, etc." I said, "Well, he lives alone. Yes, he does." I said, "Well, there's something puzzling me because if you look on the wash basin, you would see different toothbrush, 2 or 3 sets of toothbrush." And I said, "I just wonders who it is. If he's living alone, would you mind looking at the photograph?" And he took the photograph and he looked at the toothbrush, and he said, "No, I don't know who it is." And then I said, "I've just shown you a photograph of your lover of 25 years lying naked in a bath, stabbed to death. Although it's just in the corner of the photograph, you can clearly see him. And you look at toothbrush."
Yeah.
This only tells me that you are not upset because you've seen this before. And the only way that you've seen this before is you were on the crime scene. And then he suddenly burst out crying. "Oh, how could you show me this?" I said, "No, drop the act. It's too late now to start crying." I mean, if you can just imagine, if you see a photograph of your wife lying dead, stabbed in a bath, you're not going to look at toothbrush, are you?
No, you're not going to be looking saying, "Oh, I could have really, the wallpaper needs replacing."
That's the thing. So that's the way that we sort of got him into a corner, and the truth came out that he didn't kill his lover, but he was there that morning. He arrived, and he actually did see him dead, lying in the water, and he turned it around and he left the scene just as it is because he was married, and he didn't want it to come out and his wife would know, etc. The whole thing. So he wasn't the killer, but it was true. He had seen that scene before. So there's a little way, that's an example of if you show up what you look at.
Yeah. What about the thing you see in, pop psychology books, that if people are telling a lie, they look up to the left or something, or they their eyes just...
Yeah, that's called neuro-linguistic programming.
Right.
There is truth to that. If you are trained in it, of course, you can try and fake it. Yeah. Eventually, it will come through. Yes, we do use that technique as well. There are many others that you do use, but that is a helpful one as well. Where do they look? When they're telling the truth or when they making something up.
Right.
But there might be a different reason why they're making something up. It might not be that they're actually involved in it.
Yes.
But that is one of the techniques.
And what is your eyes look upwards?
Well, there are different ones. They can either look up I'm not going to give all of it away, but or they can look to the side or they can look down. And then if it's left or right, it's what's only different things. But be careful because it can be different to a left-handed person.
Ah, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, got you.
So first, you need to establish a baseline. So I would often just ask them basic questions and see what their eyes do when I know they are speaking the truth. And then any deviant from that would give an indication that, well, here's something.
Yes.
But it doesn't necessarily indicate guilt. We have to check it.
Yes. Yes, it just indicates they're not telling the truth, but there may be an ulterior motive for that.
Yes, they might. Yeah, they might
for some other purpose. But it's sort of what.
There are quite a few techniques, that we use. That was one of them. There's the view questionnaire, just how people talk. If you would say, my wife and I went to the shopping center. In that sentence, my wife and I, they're next to each other, so you were there together.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say, I went to the shopping center with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in the beginning, she's at the end of the sentence. You went to the shopping center, but you split up.
Mm.
All right. Or you can say, I went to the shopping center with the wife. No, you're not even owning her. You can have a divorce, something like that. So just little things like that. Or you could say something like, I went to my mom's house for Sunday for lunch and I left my mother's place. And then I would say, oh, you had an argument because she changed from mom to mother.
Right.
Which is more formal,
Yes.
and the word left indicates there was friction.
Yes.
So it's little ways. But if you're trained and you know what you're doing, it comes up.
I've got you.
I mustn't give away too many secrets.
No,
because
exactly.
Nobody's going to talk to me. Nobody's just going to talk to me.
Well, no, there'll be masses of murderers running around the place getting away with it. Just stare straight ahead. Just stare straight ahead, whatever the question.
I'm not too worried about them, but I'm worried about my boyfriend. Although he's a lawyer, so he's fine.
Well, you've got him pasted down there anyway with the psychological traits. Yes.
Yes, I do. We understand each other very well. An old hand, so that's fine.
Right. Well, that was lovely. Thank you ever so much for your time, Micki. It's a delight talking to you. And I mean, obviously, we know each other. We're in contact fairly regularly with Ancient Origins anyway. But I say, great pleasure talking to you. And just for all of us here in the Northern Hemisphere who are suffering winter, tell us what the weather's like in Mauritius. Just make us really envious.
Well, as I was talking to you, I had to close the doors, because of the noise factor. So while I was talking to you, I actually opened the doors again because it's so hot and humid, and literally we walk around. In Mauritius, winter wear would be jeans and a T-shirt. That's winter wear. So at the moment, I'm sitting here in a little top, sleeveless, etc. It's hot, it's humid. I can hear the ocean down there. It's tropical, it's beautiful. The wind is playing. It is just beautiful paradise. And I know you've got Dennis wreaking havoc outside.
Yes, we've had Chiara, and now we've got Dennis. Yes, the storms. Right, well, I'll leave you to your tropical paradise, and I will get back to shoveling snow from the drive and speak again. Micki Pistorius, thank you ever so much.
Thank you, Charles.
Right, it's winter. Time for huddling round log fires. Well, we used to do that, but we've actually got central heating and joined the 20th century now here.
Yes, well, we often used to have a log fire, and we're always a bit perplexed how some fires seem to do quite well and burn well and be warm and last a while, and some didn't. Well, it's because we didn't really know the folklore of logs.
Logs, yes.
And of course, at one time, that was fairly important that you did know which logs to burn and which logs weren't that good.
Mm-hmm.
There is a traditional poem that tells you everything you need to know about choosing the right firewood.
Oh.
Logs to burn, logs to save the coal a turn. Here's a word to make you wise. When you hear the woodman's cries, never heed his usual tale that he has good logs for sale, but read these lines and really learn the proper kind of logs to burn. Oak logs will warm you well if they're old and dry. Larch logs of pine will smell, but the sparks will fly. Beech logs for Christmas time, yew logs heat well. Scotch logs, it is a crime for anyone to sell. Birch logs will burn too fast, chestnuts scarce at all. Hawthorn logs are good to last if you cut them in the fall. Holly logs will burn like wax. You should burn them green. Elm logs like smouldering flax, no flame to be seen. Pear logs and apple logs, they will scent your room. Cherry logs across the dogs smell like flowers in bloom. But ash logs, all smooth and grey, burn them green or old. Buy up all that come your way, they're worth their weight in gold. There you go, ash folk. Get your ash.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Handy tip from you. And now you're off to do that seasonal Norfolk tradition of rubbing down with sandpaper an old door.
Yes, I get all the good jobs, don't I?
On you go.
Thank you and goodbye.
And that's it. Once again, we're out of time. It just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening in, and I'll hope you join me again same time next week. And ladies, if you're thinking of murdering your husbands, don't give the game away by going out to celebrate immediately after you've done the deed. Till next time, this is Charles Christian saying, stay well, stay weird, stay different. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @ChristianUncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.